There are many things about the presidents we don't know. Even during Teddy Roosevelt's time, he hid the fact that he had lost the sight in his eye after he was punched by a White House aide. Why did the aide punch him? And how did he respond? Stay tuned. I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. This is my first video, and I want to start by saying welcome, and I hope you find these stories interesting. My goal for this channel is to tell the little-known stories about the presidents that bring out their humanity. All too often, we think of the presidents based on their politics and their policies. This channel is not about either of those things. It's about the quirks, the joys, and even sometimes the sadness around the presidents. I became interested in presidential history when I was a kid. My parents had this book, 4 Days, about the Kennedy assassination. And reading the stories and looking at the pictures made me feel for the Kennedy family on their worst day. It also made me think about the impact the presidency has on the country. And this love of the presidency didn't stop when I was a kid. When I was a grad student at the University of Michigan School of Information, I built a website about the presidents. This was in 1995, so that was a little unusual at the time. Eventually, the site became POTUS.com, and I hope you'll forgive me as I plug this website during my videos. When people learn about my website or they learn about my interest in presidential history, they usually ask questions. And I usually answer those questions with stories. I may not have all the facts off the top of my head, but I can tell a good story. At least that's the feedback I've received. Usually it's followed with, "That's really interesting," or "I had no idea." And I got to thinking, if these people that don't have an interest in history or presidential history find this interesting, maybe others will as well. And that's my goal. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for letting me take a little bit of time to tell you about myself, but I know you're still wondering, how did Roosevelt lose the sight in his eye? It all started with Roosevelt's fragile childhood constitution. He was always getting sick. In order to build up his strength, he took up a vigorous exercise regimen, including boxing. And this love of boxing continued through his life. When he went to college at Harvard, he joined the intramural boxing squad as a light heavyweight. As a side note, and I love history side notes, he was not the only president to box while at Harvard. John Kennedy also did some boxing while he was there. While he was the New York City Police Commissioner, he started boxing clubs and befriended many professional fighters, including former heavyweight champion John L. Sullivan. While he was New York's governor, he would bring professional boxers to the governor's mansion to spar with him. In fact, the state's comptroller refused to approve a bill for a mat he used for boxing and wrestling because it was not considered a dignified pursuit for a governor. Dignified or not, he continued boxing when he moved into the White House. Although he no longer sparred with professionals, he did recruit military aides to box with him. And this is where our story intersects with that of Dan Moore, a captain in the artillery and also an amateur boxer. Another side note, Captain Moore was a first cousin to the First Lady, Edith Roosevelt, and a great-great-nephew of former Vice President Aaron Burr. In a sparring session in 1905, when the president was 47 and Captain Moore was about 28, Captain Moore hit Roosevelt in the left eye, causing severe hemorrhaging, eventually a detached retina, and finally blindness in the eye. So what happened to Moore? Well, nothing. He didn't even know he had injured the president for another 12 years. Roosevelt kept his injury a secret. He even kept boxing a little bit. He was getting older and suffering from other ailments. Of the White House incident in which he was blinded, Roosevelt wrote in his autobiography, "I had to abandon boxing as well as wrestling, for in one bout a young captain of artillery cross-countered me in the eye, and the blow smashed the little blood vessels. Fortunately, it was my left eye, but the sight has been dim ever since. And if it had been the right eye, I should have been entirely unable to shoot. Accordingly, I thought it better to acknowledge that I had become an elderly man and would have to stop boxing. I then took up jiu-jitsu for a few years." According to Moore's 1941 New York Times obituary, he is quoted as saying, "It never got around to me till I saw in the papers the other day that he had said that he lost the sight of his eye while boxing with a captain of artillery who was his aide. He didn't name anybody then, but I knew that he must have meant me, for I happened to have been the only boxing aide he had who was in the artillery." Moore also stated, "But could you ask for any better proof of the man's sportsmanship than the fact that he never told me what I had done to him?" After leaving the White House, Moore would teach field artillery, and as a lieutenant colonel, fought in World War I. He died in 1941 at the age of 63. And that's how President Roosevelt lost the sight in his eye. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe to hear more presidential stories. And please visit POTUS.com for more interesting facts about the presidents.